Information is power, but the format makes a difference. In the wrong hands, electronic data can be corrupted, manipulated, erased. In the right hands, physical media can last forever. Codes can be handed down or traded, strengthening bonds between players around the world, and over time, these pages are a trove of secrets, a vault of experience, a magazine loaded with answers. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Nintendo Power. Nintendo Power was a print magazine that ran 285 issues over 24 years from July of 1988 through December of 2012. It focused on tips and tricks for Nintendo games and contained exclusive features like complete level maps, cheat codes, comics, contests, and previews of upcoming titles. For years, it wasn't just the first source for Nintendo information, it was the best source. In 1985, the video game industry in the United States was on the verge of extinction. A strange thing to say about $100 million in annual sales, but after 3 years of decline from a peak of $3 billion, it's the truth. Starting in the 1970s, video game sales increased year over year, both in arcades and with home gaming systems. Atari posted sales that were doubling annually, reaching around 15 million consoles sold in the US in 1982. By the end of 1983, however, they reported nearly $500 million in losses. Blame oversaturation of the marketplace with hardware and software. There were a lot of systems and game manufacturers. Blame the misrepresentation of product. Have you seen the amazing artwork on the packages compared to what the games actually looked like? Blame a lack of quality control as third-party manufacturers unscrupulously cashed in on every concept they could clone, delivering buggy games or games that, in the end, just weren't fun. Blame E.T., a game that did all of that. By 1985, video games were considered such a bad investment in the US that the word video game was intentionally sidestepped when promoting one of the most popular systems ever created, the console that turned everything around, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo can trace its Japanese roots all the way back to the late 1800s when they were founded by Fusajiro Yamauchi to make playing cards. Over the decades, they embraced new technologies, went public in 1962, and in 1977 released their first home gaming system called the Color TV game. Inspired by Coleco's ColecoVision, Nintendo created a new cartridge-based game system. They also integrated a lockout chip which, while still allowing third-party development, also allowed for greater quality control over the games that it could play.
I warned you! I tell you!
It was released in Japan in 1983 as the Famicom, a portmanteau of family computer. Success in Japan would have meant a subsequent launch in the US, if not for the previously mentioned cratering of the US video game industry. While that delayed the release, it also inspired some clever marketing. Howard Phillips played a major role in the development of that US launch strategy. In 1981, he joined Nintendo of America as their 5th employee. Over the next 2 years, he managed Nintendo's first US warehouse, which was located in Washington State. By 1983, he was responsible for the reception and distribution of all the Nintendo arcade units being shipped to the US from Japan, roughly 4,000 units of Donkey Kong per month in the first year, cementing Nintendo's US arcade business with nearly $200 million in sales. That same year, Nintendo launched the Famicom in Japan. After he was able to put his hands on a console himself, Phillips realized what a game changer it was. His unique insight into the US gaming industry, his enthusiasm for the product, and having been witness to its rise and the causes of the recession, made him an indispensable voice advising executives at Nintendo how to best proceed. 1983 was also the year that Gail Tilden was hired by Nintendo of America as their marketing manager. Tilden, Phillips, and the rest of the Nintendo of America team worked with their Japanese counterparts to reimagine the Famicom as a device more suited for the US market as it currently existed. Instead of presenting a video game machine, they called it an entertainment system. It featured interchangeable game packs which echoed the familiar and still beloved VCR, the use of a light zapper and other peripherals like Rob the robotic operating buddy in early advertisements, positioned the NES as an interactive toy with complementary game components. The Nintendo Entertainment System was tested in limited markets starting in December of 1985, then fully launched to all of US retail beginning in February of 1986. From the beginning, Phillips and Tilden maintained a customer feedback campaign through cards that were inserted into the packaging for both the game packs and the NES systems. This allowed them to create a growing database of customer information, important things like names, addresses, phone numbers, favorite member of the Donkey Kong family. At the same time, Phillips put together a handful of Nintendo America employees to staff the phones for a game counselor hotline. The combination of their massive database and the increasing volume of calls to the hotline convinced Nintendo that there was more opportunity here. According to Phillips, quote, "When we first launched the NES, we figured out very quickly that kids were just dying to get information about the games, not just new games that were coming out, but also how to play them." Hello, yes? What games are coming out, and how do you play them? In 1987, that turned into the Nintendo Fun Club. In exchange for your information, the team at Nintendo would send out a magazine called the Nintendo Fun Club News for free. 4 issues were shipped out to customers through 1987. The president of Nintendo of America, Minoru Arakawa, pulled some inspiration from Japanese customers. Magazines about video games were big in Japan with the kids and teens that were buying and playing the games, partially for the news, previews, tips, and tricks they shared, but also for the social connection between gamers. Naturally, he suggested that they create something similar for the US market, a good idea conceptually and financially. With a Fun Club member database pushing 600,000, it was eating up a lot of the marketing budget to keep sending out free magazines. Phillips was familiar with the Japanese magazines and agreed that it made sense to try it in the US. He said, quote, "I would get these really thick, dense magazines as part of the regular weekly shipments from Japan. I'd get these in the warehouse and I'd crack them open and look at the cool new games that were coming out. I'd almost get down with a magnifying glass to look at screenshots and things like that. It was natural for us to think that the kids in the US would be as eager to have that as well." The database had grown, the fan club magazine had grown, the handful of phone bank counselors was now over 100. This marketing effort was becoming a business in and of itself. In 1988, they made the decision to discontinue the free Fun Club magazine and switch to a subscription-based publication, which would, at the very least, cover the cost of its own production.
So how do you think he does it?
Beats me.
Where'd he learn that trick? He always knows what games to get before anybody else.
Subscribe now and get with it.
There he goes. Mr. Nintendo.
Nintendo Power. Call now and get with it.
Gail Tilden, the marketing manager for Nintendo of America, was responsible for taking all of these ideas and turning them into a thing. First and foremost, what were they going to call it? Ideally, the name would synergize with the tagline already associated with Nintendo's US marketing strategy, "Now you're playing with power." They considered calling it Power Player, but that name was already trademarked by another company. In the end, it was a suggestion/compromise with Arakawa, who declared that, whatever they call it, it better have the word Nintendo in it. The first issue of Nintendo Power was cover dated July-August of 1988 and sent out for free to everyone who was already a member of the Nintendo Fun Club. Beyond that, everyone who wanted to could subscribe. Arakawa was listed as the publisher, but the real work of making the magazine was marketing manager Tilden as editor-in-chief. Nintendo printed 3 million copies in addition to the 600,000 that were already going out to Fun Club members. The timing was perfect as it coincided with the promotion for one of the most anticipated video game sequels of all time, Super Mario Bros. 2. The cover of issue 1 featured a surreal glimpse of the next stage of Mario's evolution as a mascot for Nintendo and a popular gaming character, leaping over a mushroom, swinging a carrot as he's pursued by what appears to be a member of the Lizard royal family. Griffiths Advertising delivered the cover art utilizing a clay sculpture created by Will Vinton Studios, the same studio that created iconic claymation-based brand characters like the California Raisins and Domino's Pizza's The Noid. Articles were written and edited by a small staff in the US. Howard Phillips himself was a senior editor, but the magazine was designed and constructed in Japan by the staff at Nintendo headquarters. 1988 meant no email, no internet, and low-res fax machines that wouldn't be able to handle the detailed work necessary to properly produce the magazine, resulting in frequent regular trips to Japan for Tilden. She made corrections, suggested changes, and then ultimately signed off on the proofs before she and the magazine made their way back to the US. As the marketing manager, Tilden was responsible for the execution of the Nintendo of America strategy, not just for Nintendo Power, but Nintendo Power became a large part of it. She had a specific vision in mind for how the magazine should look and how she expected US readers to engage with it. She frequently butted heads with the Japanese design staff when she wasn't willing to compromise, earning her the reputation of the Dragon Lady. Many of the features the magazine built its reputation on were there from the start, like classified information, the place where programmers and pros reveal top-secret programming quirks and ultra techniques, was designed to look like readers were getting legitimate secrets straight from the source. With top-secret stamps all over a manila envelope background, it revealed the kind of cheats that would become legendary. If you believed your friend Mike when he told you that he discovered the 30 Lives code for Contra, that's what he wanted you to think. The truth is, he just had a subscription to Nintendo Power. Hello, Mike. All this time, You son of a... Counselor's Corner acted as a kind of FAQ from the call center, taking the most common complaints and putting them in an easy-to-reference feature that ideally would also cut down on the number of calls the counselors received. As Tilden stated, quote, "Up until a certain point, game counseling was free. Later, Nintendo switched to a 900 number. Similar to the Fun Club newsletter, when something explodes in popularity, it becomes a burden. Because so many people wanted to call Nintendo. We had literally hundreds of people on shift because we were serving the whole country." The comic strip Howard and Nestor provided the staff with a different format for exactly that, but also to give the magazine and thereby the staff at Nintendo a human face and some personality. Howard was based on Howard Phillips, Nestor an original creation whose name was a riff on the system itself, the NES or NES. Howard was the adult, the one with the answers, the counselor on the other end of the phone. Nestor was the avatar for the kid reading the magazine who would never admit that they needed help and called the Nintendo tip line. According to Tilden, Arakawa himself asked them to use Phillips as the template for Howard. Quote, "He had already started assisting me in public relations in 1985. He had that kind of quirky thing with the bow tie and the saddle shoes, and Nintendo embraced and put that forward." Howard and Nestor became a regular feature of the magazine, appearing in every issue through 1993, their strips usually focusing on a specific game and thereby the world and characters of that particular game to be the theme of their interactions, while revealing tips along the way. Phillips left Nintendo in 1991 to take a job at LucasArts, at which time the Howard character was written out of the strip. It was renamed Nestor's Adventures before being retired at the end of 1993, returning for a few special editions to check in on Nestor before the magazine ceased publication altogether in 2012. Nintendo Power survived longer than most print magazines dedicated to video games. Heck, it survived longer than most print magazines dedicated to anything. Throughout the 1990s, the internet rendered print media obsolete. The cycle of publication couldn't compete with the immediacy of a global information network accessible on demand. Change was inevitable, a requirement to survive. In 2005, Nintendo Power got a facelift and a redesign, new logo, new Hyper Nintendo fan focus, and new features intended to take advantage of news previews and community engagement that could only come from Nintendo directly while transitioning away from tips, tricks, and cheat codes, things that quickly proliferated online. In 2007, Nintendo relinquished the power to a third-party publisher called Future US. It also signaled a switch from bi-monthly publication to monthly with a bonus 13th holiday-themed issue every year. In 2010, the hotline was discontinued. 2 years later, in 2012, after 24 years in business, Nintendo Power was canceled altogether. Similar magazines were being published around the world. In 1992, UK publisher EMAP released the first issue of Nintendo Magazine System, a subtle play on Nintendo Entertainment System. Other magazines included Club Nintendo in Mexico, Nintendo World in Brazil, and Nintendo Dream in Japan, which began publishing in 1996 and, as far as we can tell, is still publishing today. In 2017, Nintendo of America announced Nintendo Power's return as a podcast, featuring host and former editor-in-chief of Nintendo Power, Chris Slate. Episodes are posted when they're posted. Stop asking. As of this video, there are 53 episodes available, the most recent published November of 2022. Hello. Stop asking. That's the official return. For the unofficial spiritual successor, check out Nintendo Force, which began publishing in 2013, shortly after the cancellation of Nintendo Power in 2012. As of this video, they are on issue 64 and still offering subscriptions for physical or digital editions through their website and Patreon. The fan favorite Howard and Nestor strip returned one last time for the 280th and final issue of Nintendo Power in the US in 2012, although it had been retitled since Howard had long since left Nintendo. Now titled Nestor and Max, the strip featured Nestor, now an adult, with his son Max, a reference to the NES Max controller released in 1988, the same year Nintendo Power began publishing. The father and son reminisce about how far the magazine has come, how they've grown up together with it, and how it has always been part of their relationship with games and with each other. Howard is represented in the sentimental moment by a bow tie mounted and framed on the wall. Nestor's nostalgia almost gets the better of him before Max points out that the last issue doesn't have to be the end of anything. In fact, because it's physical media, that complete collection of magazines on Nestor's shelf isn't going anywhere. It's there to be revisited, shared, passed on. Max sees the full run of magazines as an accomplishment, both for the people who made them and for Nestor in collecting and preserving them. In his words, it's like when you finish a great game. You're kind of sad to see it end, but really proud and happy too. 24 years is a long time for a magazine to survive. 24 years during the full adoption of the internet as the primary means of communication and no-cost instant gratification is miraculous. It's a testament to the writers and artists who created it and the strength of Nintendo Power. Usually do this thing when this is rolling up.
Yep.
Straighten my code out. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, if you would like early access to the videos ad-free, as well as behind-the-scenes features, sneak peeks at upcoming projects, and exclusive monthly podcast about the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/ToyGalaxy and let us know in the comments down below if you had a subscription to Nintendo Power magazine. I wasn't part of the Fun Club and never got a subscription to Nintendo Power. As much as I was into Nintendo, as soon as Mortal Kombat was released on the Sega Genesis, I switched loyalties and didn't look back until the GameCube was released. I was a teenager with a thirst for incredibly fake-looking fighting game blood splatter, and Sega had what Nintendo didn't.
Wow.
It's a play on their old.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Cut.
Look it up.